All right, welcome. We are doing Notebook LM today, and I am obsessed with Notebook LM because it really is better AI. Now, let me clarify, it is Google Gemini, and I do use a lot of Google Gemini. But if you are a Google user, Notebook LM is free, and it's going to be one of the most helpful things that you do. So I am Alice Keeler. I'm a professional learning consultant with Orion. And so I'm here today with Orion just to share a few tips about Notebook LM. All right, so I'm a firm believer that tech should change things. I think a lot of us have seen some studies that have come out recently showing that technology doesn't really make a big difference. In fact, it can be a distraction. We're seeing some schools that are going back to paper and pencil. And honestly, if we're just using it like paper and pencil, we might as well. I'm a big fan of paper and pencil and traditional teaching methods. A lot of times that is the best way to do it. And then there's other times where technology can really take us further. And I think that Notebook LM is one of those things that are really going to help us do more. So, if you've been using, I don't know, ChatGPT or even Google Gemini, Claude, whatever your AI of choice is, it's a really powerful tool. And make a multiple choice quiz like, is this the best use of this really powerful technology? But not to mention, like, are the questions on the quiz even what I taught? Like, if I go into Google Gemini and I type in, hey, make me a quiz about the War of 1812, like, okay, where did those questions come from? What are the sources? And that, as an educator, bothers me. Like, I don't want to have just random sources. I want to have more control over the information that I'm giving to my students and also what I am using for my assessment. So that is where Notebook LM comes into play. So if you've not used Notebook LM yet, it is notebooklm.google.com. Notebooklm.google.com. If you've noticed, like, most of the Google tools are like this: maps.google.com, drive.google.com. Since we're using Notebook LM, it is notebooklm.google.com. And it makes a notebook. And it's important to say that because you're going to see it referenced across the Google products as your notebook, and it is referring to Notebook LM. So as soon as you go to notebooklm.google.com, you're going to see the option to create a new notebook or to access one of the notebooks that you already have. As you can see here, I already have several that I've made. Like, anytime I'm thinking about a topic like rubrics, I'm going to make a new notebook for that. Or how do I do effective formative assessment? I'm going to make a notebook for that. How can I help the office staff with spreadsheets? I made a notebook for that. How do I increase critical thinking? So I made a notebook for that. So I've uploaded all of these resources for critical thinking. And then when I add in my own lesson plans or some of my resources, and I say, hey, evaluate my stuff against these research articles, that's going to be really helpful to help me to be an even better teacher. All right, so step one for Notebook LM is you have to upload your documents. So what's great about Notebook LM is it's using your sources and not the dumpster fire of the internet. So as soon as you create a new notebook, it immediately says, well, what sources do you want? Now, you can use the dumpster fire of the internet if you want to. So if you type in that search box up there at the top, it says fast research, and you can drop down that to do a more in-depth research. Obviously, that takes longer, and it's going to help you find resources and just import them in. I'm going to talk about that a little bit later, I hope. But that's a quick way to get started with your notebook, is to just search the web. But really, the power of Notebook LM is that you can upload your own files, link to websites, Google Drive, and copied text. You are training your AI notebook. Instead of whatever random sources, it's your sources. And all the information it's giving you is directly from those sources. So as educators, that's better. It's a lot better. So you can do the fast research. I have a little warning sign on there. But one of the things that I do before I start a notebook is I actually go and I search for research articles. I want to add Dr. Norman Webb's articles on depth of knowledge or some of the different things that I want to make sure that whatever I'm creating is influenced by these research articles. So I'm making a rubric. I want research on creating effective rubrics. So I'm going to add that into my Notebook LM. So you're going to add your files. There are websites that as a teacher you use that you trust, link to those. YouTube videos, a YouTube channel that you like, link to that so that you know that the sources that it's using is not just some random guy who believes in Bigfoot. It is actually, scientists or other teachers who you trust who has good information so that you are in control of that information. Now, here's one of my favorites is copied text. So when you're looking at the upload window, you see in the bottom right, that last option says copied text. And that makes you the source. So yes, I can go find some information someplace, copy and paste into copied text. And I do that. So for example, you will not believe this. I went to, it was quizzes and now it's Wayground. And I copied every single page from their help center. So, and I put it into copied text. Now, why did I do that? Because you can just add links to web pages. Well, you max out at 50. So if you only can do 50 sources, there were more than 50 pages in the Wayground help center. So I actually copy and pasted it all into copied text. So that way I had a lot of pages all into what's now just one source. Okay, so that was cool. And then I had my own personal, like, how do I make this in Wayground? And I could ask it questions and interact with it on my terms in a way that it would respond because I uploaded information about myself and my teaching. So it would help me to use Wayground more personalized to me. So, right. But whatever lesson you're teaching, whatever you're doing, open up copied text and just brain dump all of the things that you know about that topic. What are the things that you do when you teach that topic? Right. So like I like to use the 5E's lesson plan. I have a rule that I want the students to do the thinking before I do. And here are my tricks for when I'm teaching this lesson, the things that I include. So yes, I'm going to upload my lesson plan. I'm going to upload my department policies possibly if those are going to influence what I'm doing with this particular notebook. I'm going to upload my standards. I always upload my standards. So I add that in there. But I always want to just have that little extras. I'm thinking about, okay, I'm making this notebook to help me write newsletters. I'm doing it to help me write a lesson plan. What are you using this notebook for? Okay, so now open up this copied text as a resource and you type in everything that you know and their values about you. And that adds you as a source. And I think that's really important to really personalize that you're training the AI to be more like you because it considers you an expert. So all that information that you put in there. So I highly encourage you to do that. You can always add more sources as you go. There is a 50 source limit. I upgraded mine. I pay a little bit of extra money each month because I'm like, I need more than 50. I love using NotebookLM. But once you have your sources, they're over there on the left-hand side, and you'll see that it says add sources up at the top, so you can add more, but there you have them all checkmarked. So you see here in the chat in the center, it's saying that I am chatting with my 14 sources. So I can start asking questions that I can better understand. What does it mean to make a 5E's lesson plan? How do I engage students better? Now, here's the problem. You're only chatting with your sources. So if you say, what color is the sky? Well, probably you didn't upload something that said what color is the sky. Now, I do this demo all of the time where I type into the chat portion, what color is the sky? And it returns back, hey, your sources don't say that. I don't know. But what I thought was really funny about it when I did it this time is it actually went a little bit further and says, I don't know, because it doesn't say so in these things about the quadratic formula that you uploaded. But one of your sources, and I can tell you which one of your sources had a picture that had a sky in it. And in that picture, the sky was blue. Like, oh my gosh, that's wild. So I love that it got this information that the sky is blue actually from my sources and not from outside knowledge, but it also tells me that. I don't know if you can see this, but right next to that bolded word blue is a little 1. And if I click on that, it's going to show me which source it came from and where in the source that it got that information. So that's really powerful that everything is grounded in those sources that you uploaded. As educators, that's what we want, right? Where did that information come from? How do I know it's good information? Well, you know it's good information because I personally added into my notebook. But don't fear, you can share these notebooks. So don't feel like you're constantly having to recreate the wheel. If one of your teaching partners has created a notebook, you guys can share one together. Now, here's the thing with the chat. That's it right here in the middle where I'm asking, like, how does the 5 E's model enhance algorithmic thinking? And can you explain a visual strategy for this? As I'm asking questions of my sources, let's say that I've shared this with Paul, and Paul joins my NotebookLM. Is he going to see my embarrassing questions and be like, oh, she didn't know what the 5 E's lesson plan model was? He's not going to know that. Well, he might, because I'll tell you that in a second. But he's not going to see my chat. My chat is for me. A new feature is that the chat lives. So when I close it and I open it back up, my chat is still there. It used to like start from scratch each time. So that's nice. So I have my history of my chat. And you can use those 3 dots at the top of the chat to clear the chat if you want. But the chat is between you and the sources, not with you and anyone else. So if you make a NotebookLM and you ask a bunch of questions, and then you share the NotebookLM with your students through Google Classroom, will they see the stuff that you typed? No, they won't. They'll be able to chat with the sources themselves and get answers based on just those sources. So that's nice. So if you don't want them to know something, don't add a source that has it. So if you're trying to get them to do some more inquiry based. Now, Paul, I don't know if you know this. I just discovered it a few minutes ago, so I didn't include it in my presentation. But up at the top of the chat, where it has the 3 dots right next to it, it has the settings icon, looks like little sliders. It allows you to change from answering questions to change it to guided learning mode so that it will help you to understand the concepts instead of telling you the answer. I haven't played with it yet. I just noticed the settings, so I don't want to like tell you how it works yet. I do know how it works in just regular Gemini, which is a really cool feature, but just so you know, that seems to be an update that I didn't notice before. So when you're chatting, it is only returning back the information that you have provided it, and it's going to cite where it got it from, which is super powerful. So I asked it, tell me about the common mistakes when solving quadratic equations, and you can see it's now returning this, and then you've got right here underneath sign errors, you see this 1, 2, 3, 4, maybe not, they're little circles. Those are the sources where it got it from. If you make a NotebookLM and you asked it, tell me about the quadratic formula, it's going to say, I don't know what you're talking about, because you probably didn't upload things about the quadratic formula. I uploaded things about the quadratic formula. I uploaded sources about the style of lesson planning I like to do. I uploaded my standards. So I always want to add those things. So here's the thing. After I chat, remember my students are not going to see that. So I'm like, hey, this is going to help explain to them some common errors. Maybe they want to review that. That's a good piece of information. Okay, so at the bottom of your chat, it says save to note. So these are chat responses that you want to come back to. Aha, that's what I was talking about. So you remember where I said no one can see your chat or what questions you ask? They can if you save it as a note. So the notes, I'm going to say, are public. They're not public. They can be. You can, depending on what NotebookLM subscription you have, you can publish your notebook publicly. But when someone joins your notebook and they look in your notebook, they're going to see your notes that you saved. So do be aware of that. So this is a great way for you to curate a notebook, something for students to ask questions about, and then have these notes that students can refer to. Maybe you have the directions or other pieces of information that you want them to know outside of just what is in the sources. And that's important because, oops, I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. I'm sorry. It's important because the notes are not sources. I'm going to show you that in a second. So which sources responded to the questions? So what you can do actually is check and uncheck the sources on the side. So a lot of times what I'm doing when I'm creating a notebook is I am uploading all of these additional sources. Like if I want to do a lesson plan on a certain topic, I'm also going to add in some research articles. I'm going to add in some articles about how I do lesson planning and how I do my rubrics. If I'm going to make a quiz though, I don't want the quiz to ask, how do you make a rubric? Like those are not the sources that I want to ask. If I'm not asking about rubrics, I don't want my rubric sources to be included. So notice here in this screenshot, what I have is it says 3 sources, where a second ago we had 14. So these 3 sources are, when I ask a question, it's only answering those 3 sources. And then also the same for on the studio outputs, which I'll show you in a second. When you create things in NotebookLM, whether it's asking a question or making flashcards or a quiz, it's only going to look at the sources that you have checked. That's important. So when we take notes, what is the notes? It's that sidebar here on the side. It says studio, and at the bottom it says to add a note. It's your notebook. You can add extra notes in there. You can just take notes and type and leave notes for yourself, your collaborators. Like if you have a project, leave the project directions where the project directions are not a source. Not a source. So when they're chatting, it's not going to be reading or referencing whatever you have in the notes. So when you save a response as a note, when I go to make a quiz, it's not referencing that note. So do be aware of that. You can add those notes. It's your notebook. Treat it like a notebook, like I'm taking notes on a topic. I'm finding sources and resources on a topic. All right, so notes are not sources, but you can add them as a source. You can add them as a source. So in that little note section, if you click on the 3 dots, it's going to give you the option to convert to source. So I do this all of the time. I select which sources I want to pull from when I ask a question, and then I'm going to move that note into, like I'll say my question is like, give me the top 10 ways students can be engaged. Great. So then I'm going to make that into a note, which is not a source. And then I'm going to convert it to its source, which moves it to the left side. And then I uncheck all of my sources, and I only check that one source because when I make an infographic, I want the infographic to be the 10 ways to engage students. I don't want it pulling from the other sources and giving me other information. So when I control what goes in that note, and then I take that note, turn it into a source, now I can create things off of that source that are really exactly what I wanted. Because otherwise, when I put make me a podcast, which is actually audio overview, it could be talking about anything out of the checked sources. So it's just going to start talking about the standards. Well, actually, for this particular notebook, I'm only doing one standard. I want the whole standards. So when you are going to use the studio resources, do take advantage of unchecking the different sources. All right, so then we're creating studio resources, and those are like podcasts, slides, videos, quiz, blog post, infographic. These are amazing. If you have never done this, just create a podcast. Now, I want you to think about this. My husband's an English teacher. Some of his students are not on grade level. They're not on grade level. So you tell them, hey, read this book, and they literally can't. You can't call their parents and be like, hey, your kid's not on grade level today. Can you send them to school tomorrow being able to read on grade level? That's ridiculous. So, and then, sometimes the text is just not engaging, or it's too much. It's just a really long source. So I got a little fly flying around me, so I'm trying to wave it away. Sorry about that. It's a real long source. Turning it into a podcast that students can listen to makes it accessible for everybody. You can actually also do it in another language. So you see those little arrows that are on those studio buttons. When you click on those arrows, it allows you to make other descriptions or to define more clearly what you want. So the quiz doesn't have to be multiple choice. You can say, hey, I want critical thinking questions. I want ones that encourage students to describe a project or an invention that they would make based on this information, so that you can have output that's a lot higher quality. I always go into the infographic. I actually have taken and described, I have a Google Keep note that I keep that has, these are the colors for my school, and these are the school mascot, and these are the elements that I like to include, and I want a style where it's not too busy and I have a lot of white space and I don't want the graphics overlapping themselves. So, and I've saved that set of directions so that when I create an infographic, I add these extra details into the description so that honestly, I get a pretty consistent infographic. So even if one way that I get around the 3 infographic limit a day is I have some sample student accounts. So I'll go and make my infographic. I got my 3 infographics for the day, and then I got my description, and I go and I paste that into when I create an infographic into another account's NotebookLM, and because I'm really detailed at describing how the output of the infographic should look, they're still pretty consistent even when I use multiple Google accounts. So that's kind of a hack. I don't think most of you have access to multiple accounts. You kind of do because you have your personal one and your school one. So you at least can probably get 6 a day. Yeah. I love making the infographics. They're really great. So don't be afraid to click on that little arrow and describe it further. These are where you're creating those resources for your students. Now, the one that you're not using, but you should be, is data table. You're like, what's data table? Exactly. That's why you're not using it. It's going to look at your source and then structure it up into a table. So like, here's a timeline of all the events, or here's just like a list of the key important elements that were in these sources. So it'll put it into a table that you can export into a spreadsheet. So think about if you've got a long PDF, or you even have the student teacher handbook. First of all, no one wants to read the student teacher handbook. NotebookLM is the perfect reason to use for your student teacher handbook, is that you're going to put it into a NotebookLM, and then you'll be like, what are the 5 things that I really need to know so that I don't get in trouble this year? Or what do you think that I overlooked? What should I share with my students today about the student teacher handbook that is really important? Like, I can just chat with the notebook instead of reading the whole thing, and then I turn it into a podcast so I can just listen to the important parts of it. Or maybe even just create myself a slide deck so I can visually look through it. It will write you blog posts if you click on reports. They're okay. The reports actually has a bunch of different report types. But I actually will then copy and paste that into regular Gemini, so it'll format it a little bit better for me. Okay, we're running low on time. It'll make you these infographics. I was just saying it makes a video of it in there. So I wanted you to try my notebook. And I'm just going to grab this link and put it in the chat. So I made a notebook. Where's chat here? Here it is. Oh, Paul says he uses the reports more than anything else. I do use reports a lot, that reports option, and it's so sneaky because when you click on the little arrow for the reports, it has multiple options inside of it that you don't even realize. And you're not stuck with those reports. You can describe what kind of report that you want. And you're like, I don't want a blog post. I don't want a quiz. I want you to structure me something that is a permission slip, whatever you want. So you can describe that, and those are really great. Okay, so let's look at my notebook. This is a notebook that I've shared. Now I have a personal account that I've upgraded that allows me to share externally. My school account, my work account does not. They are not upgraded. So the way that you're able to do something like this with your students is through Google Classroom. So what you see here is I have a notebook about NotebookLM. And on the left-hand side, I have all of my resources. And notice that you can check and uncheck them. Let me go back to that QR code. You can check and uncheck them. So now you can chat with just a subset of those. So, explain the audio and video customizations. I cheated and I picked one that they already had in there. But you'll notice as I uncheck sources, the number down here at the bottom changes. And then over here on the side in the studio, those are my notes. Those are my notes. Remember I told you notes, anybody can see them. And by notes, I mean, here's an infographic that I made. So all the studio buttons that make stuff that you can use with your students, they are saved in the side, and then you can usually download them some way. So there's 3 dots on this one. I download as an image, and then I add it into my student resources if you don't just share the whole notebook with your students through Google Classroom. So what I'd love for you to do is just take a second. Try out my notebook, ask a few questions about NotebookLM, but mostly just open it for right now. And after this, where you have some questions about NotebookLM, ask NotebookLM. So use the chat feature right in there. See if it can answer it. See how it goes. Okay. And so I have one more resource for you, and that is I have created, yes, I have 10 minutes left before this kicks me out. I have created a spreadsheet, and it randomizes every day. This list is going to randomize for you every single day. So let me put this down in the chat for you as well. There's another resource for you. And this gives you ideas of how to use the studio resource. So, right, so if you wanted a study guide, here's an idea not only for that you can make review tools out of your lectures, but it gives you a sample prompt of something you can ask in the chat or in the description when you're doing an output to help you to get that result. So it's a really long list. And I'm going to be honest, I used Google Gemini to help me make it. I did check it over a little bit, and I filtered out and deleted a lot of them. So this is my list that I feel pretty good about that I think is going to really be helpful to you. So there is the QR code for those of you who are watching. And then for those of you who are joining live, I did put the link down in the chat. Okay. So last but not least is Google Classroom is the best way to be using NotebookLM with your students. And if you are using Google Classroom, it's so easy. Under the Create button, it says NotebookLM. It's there. And you're like, why would I want to use that? Great. That's what I'm here for. It's going to create for you a notebook and then where you can choose a notebook that you already have. And it's going to add it as a source. Now you'll see from this screenshot, it's kind of hard to tell. I've actually pinned my NotebookLM to the top of the classwork page. So I have, this is the unit that I'm doing. Me personally, I create a new Google Classroom every unit. I know I'm in the minority on that. But that allows me to have my NotebookLMs about that unit pinned to the top, and then all the content in the Google Classroom class is about that unit. And then when I want to reuse assignments, I'm pulling only from that unit and not from the whole year. It makes my life much easier. That's not what I'm talking about today. So you just create NotebookLM, and then it says, hey, of the assignments you already have, see, it gives me option to create new or select existing. When I checkbox this topic or individual assignments, it attaches the attachments into my NotebookLM. So my sources are the things that I actually used in class, and I don't have to go hunt them down again. I don't have to copy them in there. It's just going to slurp up all the attachments that I gave to my students over the assignment or the unit or the topic and adds them into the NotebookLM. And then I can do my favorite, of course, which is the copied text where I type things that I know that I want students to know. And I can add other sources and resources, and then students can then use that to do studying. So they can chat with those assignments, the sources, the attachments of the assignments. But then also I can create a podcast. I can create slides. I can create an infographic. I can create flashcards and a quiz. And they're going to show up there on that sidebar, studio sidebar down in the notes for the students. So they're going to be able to take advantage of all those resources. Now, I don't know if you noticed, but on that notebook I shared with you, you do not have the buttons. The buttons to make a podcast are gone. So on this shared notebook, they're going to be able to see the resources you made. So it really creates this nice walled garden where they're only using the sources that you want them to have, and they're only getting the infographics and the slides and the podcasts that you've approved, that you're like, yes, that's accurate. That's the kind of information I want them to know. Here's a whole list of resources for you. Awesome. Now, if I were to, though, share my notebook explicitly with you, so I type your name in like a Google, actually has a share button just like Google Docs. Okay, now you have the studio buttons as well, and you can create infographics, podcasts, videos, and then we share those resources down in that notes section because it's our notebook that we are sharing together. So it's being a collaborator versus a student or somebody just accessing your notebook. Those are two different ways to use and share NotebookLM. Thank you for joining Orion Education and Training. Once again, I'm Alice Keeler, and if you'd like to join us for more professional learning opportunities or educational resources, please visit our website or join our newsletter.